Hey guys, it's Numistaka here and welcome back to part 2 of the Stupendous Sovereign extravaganza unboxing and sending for grading. If you haven't seen the first part, watch the first part first, which contains all the Victoria Sovereigns, and this box contains the Kings and a few Elizabeth proofs. But okay, so if you think all sovereigns are created equal, you are so wrong. If you think they are just a boring old bullion coin available at 2% over spot and purely collected for bullion, then you haven't been watching my videos, and again, you are so wrong. Sovereigns are possibly one of the most interesting coins in the world to collect. They are just under 1/4 of an ounce of fine gold. They've been going in their modern form since 1817, and there is just amazing variety. There's size variety, going from half a sovereign or now 1/4 of a sovereign recently, right up to 5 sovereigns. This set of sovereigns covers 2 reigns. There's a few here being sent for grading. You'll have seen all these before. There's some couple of Piedfort ones, which weigh twice as much as the average sovereign. So it's basically a 2 sovereign coin in a 1 sovereign format, double the width. There are 3,500 odd of those that were minted, and they're changing hands at pretty large amounts of money already. If you haven't yet bought a 2017 proof or BU sovereign, now is still a good time. In fact, it's probably the best time it'll ever be, because a lot of the early sales and flippers have actually offloaded their coins, or the ones who now need to pay their credit card bills are offloading them, and you can actually pick up 1 or 2 at pretty much what the issue price is, maybe a little bit more, but most of them are still for sale at much higher values. And I think anyone who does pick up one now will actually find that it's a pretty good investment going forward as well. So which is better, the Piedfort or the strike on the day? That's a bone of contention amongst certain people. A lot of people think the Piedfort is the better coin in terms of investment. I think probably the strike on the day will end up being the better coin, but we'll see. So, sovereigns. Sovereigns, as you probably know, were produced in lots and lots of different places. This particular one is a George V sovereign produced in South Africa. There are big variations between the values of South African sovereigns. The 1928, for example, is a pretty common date with 15 odd million produced. They certainly ramped up production in South Africa, but then some of the early ones and some of the late ones are a little bit more valuable. In Australia, Western Australia, the Perth Mint, you all know the Perth Mint. Well, it produced in Perth were lots and lots of varieties of sovereigns going back a long way. The P sovereigns, some of the George V P sovereigns produced in Australia are pretty valuable. I don't think I've got any here that are the most valuable P sovereigns, but it's worth taking a look at the price lists and seeing which ones have the most value. You'll find a lot of ideas on that on the some of the Australian coin dealers' websites, and some of the coins I've seen change hands for many thousands of dollars. 1927p. I mean, look at this. This is exactly like the Victorian ones. You've seen all the Victorian ones in the last video. They are just absolutely amazing condition. A lot of George V sovereigns are in good condition because they weren't really used very much in terms of circulation around this date. They were just, used for trading and paying bills between governments and all this kind of stuff. A lot of them were melted, so there's a lot of rarities where there were large mintages, and they're now fairly rare now because so many were melted. But the ones that this particular collector has collected are in great condition. He's clearly a very picky collector, and is only picking up the very best that he can find. And just look at this; it's like it was minted yesterday. He did send me a message saying how much he liked the first video, And he didn't deny that he has a sovereign press in his basement, although he didn't confirm it either, in fairness to him. And you can see here, you saw here 1925 essay, and you saw the essay for South Africa just on that baseline between the date and between the St George and the date is where the mint mark is going to be. Anything that doesn't have a mint mark is minted in London. If it has a mint mark, it'll be SA for South Africa, C for Canada, P for Perth, Melbourne, M for Melbourne, S for Sydney, etc. Here's another one. Again, same kind of amazing quality. I said in the last video when I was talking about Victoria Sovereigns that the George Sovereigns, the King ones, I think are going to be much more collectible over the next 15-20 years for one reason or another, not least of which is likely to be a change of monarch for the UK and King Charles coming on the throne. And then suddenly those King Sovereigns that were everybody's bullion fodder become harder to find and become more valuable. And so Edward VII, for example, good Edward VII sovereigns are harder and harder to find already. And, you know, picking these up now could be potentially quite a good investment for the future. And there are some dates that are a bit rarer than others. So go for the dates which are a little bit rarer. Go for those first. And you'll find all of this information in the Sovereign book by Marsh. And in fact, it's just been updated. And I'll put a little extra into this video in a moment just to show you the new book, which I showed you a little bit of in the Victoria video, because this book has now been released by Token Publishing. It's available online to buy. It's a little more expensive than the original Marsh, but then it actually contains two books in one. It contains the Sovereign book and the Half Sovereign book, both in the same book, with a lot of new colour illustrations, up-to-date information, and it was a project organised between Stephen Hill of Sovereign Rarities, Token Publishing, and Michael Marsh's his widow, to bring his book up to date. And it's a really great effort, and anyone who is serious about collecting sovereigns should probably have one of these books. They also publish a regular sovereign price list. Issue number 1 is provided with the book when you buy it, and then it'll be updated over a period of time, and you can get updates via their website, I think, as a PDF as well. So back to the sovereigns at hand. They continue to amaze me, really, to be honest. I'd be more than happy with any one of these sovereigns in my collection. 1906, this is a GB one, so it doesn't have a mint mark. Edward VII, lots and lots of detail, you can see here, lots of lustre when you tilt it round to the light, not messed about with in any way. And that's the way you want to find these things, really. An Australian one, 1905. I think 1905 is a slightly rarer date. You can always check in the book to see what the book says. And the Michael Marsh book, actually, it has everything. It has normal, common, scarce, rare, and then rarity in sovereigns goes up to, I think, rare 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe a 7, I don't know. Some sovereigns only have 1 or 2 known, like the Edward VIII sovereign that sold a few years ago at Baldwin's. Some sovereigns have millions, and they don't really know how many sovereigns are actually left in each of these years. But what Michael Marsh did was to take a look at how regularly sovereigns of a particular mint mark and particular date and particular quality appear in the marketplace over a period of years, and then work out how rare they must be based on the frequency of them appearing in public. So, it will be adjusted over a period of time. Probably new rarities will appear, and maybe some sovereigns that one thinks are rare may not be quite so rare. there are occasionally treasure troves found which contain lots of a particular date. So it will the truth will emerge over a period of time. One thing is for sure, in these particular years, round about the time of the First World War, for example, coming up to that, a lot of sovereigns from before that date were melted down and destroyed, and they went to repay war debt to America, and the Americans melted them down. And there's lots and lots of stories, and there's quite a few stories that are interesting in the Michael Marsh book as well. But so when you see a sovereign that has a very, very high mintage, that may not reflect the truth of how rare it is or otherwise. Grading sovereigns. People ask all the time, should I grade sovereigns? If you want to grade anything, then why not? That's totally a personal choice and up to you. I think that sovereigns that are in a really, really good condition like these, they deserve to be graded, because I've looked at the census reports on NGC, and there's a lot of these dates that I'm sending in now where I suspect these sovereigns will go right to the top of the census in terms of quality. So it'll be interesting to see, particularly some of the varieties. I looked at one Victorian one. I looked it up this morning. I think it was an overdate Victorian sovereign. And the highest one that was graded was a 64. And I think that the one that I'm sending could even be higher than that. Canada is a whole other story. The real rarity in Canadian sovereigns is the 1916, which goes for about £20,000, £25,000. Very, very rare coin. Most of them were melted down. Very few exist. But this particular collector has sent me a 1910, a 1917, 1918, 1919, all Canadian sovereigns. And Canadian sovereigns are pretty rare. There weren't very many of them minted in the first place, and they're certainly worth looking round. And maybe if you're watching this video from Canada or America, then you may have these things sitting in your cupboard, in the attic, in grandpa's collection of coins, and they're worthwhile picking out. And if they're in good condition, they're worthwhile grading and preserving for the future. So I really like Canadian sovereigns. They're a great rarity, and something a little bit more interesting than the average sovereign. Back to Australia, 1914, Perth Mint. You start thinking about the history of what was going on in the world during these particular years, and you realise just how historical and important these coins are, and what was going on, and the people who were dying in the trenches, the amazing battles, the stupidity of those years, and these coins bring that era to life. And so next time you see an APMEX advert for a random sovereign, random king sovereign, for only a few dollars over spot, press the button. If you haven't got a sovereign, have one or two in your collection, and maybe APMEX will send you by accident one that's worth a little bit more than spot. You never know. If you've reached the end of this, then thanks for persevering all the way through, and I hope you like this two-part look at sovereigns that are being sent for grading. Please like, subscribe, and let me have your comments.